Welcome everybody to episode 3 of Range Days. Normally we kick it right to the bay and have Dan take some swings, but today we're going to kind of change things up and talk a little tech. Dan, we are talking all about these two, the Mizuno ST190 and ST190G. Do you want to kind of jump in here and give us some thoughts on them?
Yeah, the first thought that I had when I saw the new Mizuno drivers, and specifically the G series, was an immediate return to a club I reviewed a couple years ago for THP, which was the JPX 850. A lot of soul weighting going on. I remember being very fond of it, the sound, the quality. But the one thing I thought that was really different, and this is a big change this year, was they went from that Mizuno blue profile, which we've come to know and love, to a more stark black finish on the top. What do you think about that?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, I think blue carbon fiber and composite material would look a little different and a little strange, although I'd like to see it tried. I thought they did the blue as good or better than anybody else, at least as far as the crown goes. But I think going to something a little more traditional when they're touting something that can really come on and compete with all these larger companies and big time PGA Tour type companies, meaning there are lots of play on tour, was a interesting dynamic. Less standout in the store, perhaps more standout for the discerning golfer looking for something that kind of sets up to their eye right.
Yeah, I've had some experience last year with most of their fairway woods, and I think they did a phenomenal job with the finish. But transitioning into this profile definitely creates a more comfortable transition from other options out there. Probably when you get into a bay and start experiencing head to head, you want to eliminate some of that bias that might come with an overall top line profile. But I want to move in a little bit more into the soul weighting. The one thing I noticed about JPX 850 was two kind of locked weights on each side for fade and draw, and then a weight kind of socket in the middle or pocket that you would kind of select where you wanted to go. In this case, they've kind of taken that idea and moved it to two locations, one on the heel and one on the toe, to really customize your experiences there.
True. And to be fair, I should point out there's two drivers here. The ST190 is not going to have the movable weights on the bottom. It is an adjustable driver. You can remove the shaft. You can set your lofts and face angle. But on the bottom, it's got a fixed weight for high MOI. And one thing that's not often talked about is there's a ribbed for Dan's pleasure pattern here. And the regular 190, while looks the same, does feel different and obviously has a different there. I think to me, it offers a little bit of a different sound. But going back to what Dan was saying, you see the two weights sliding down. You can fix those in for balance. You can fix those in for stability and truly adjustability as far as, face angle closure, keeping it open as you come through the hitting area.
Yeah, really driving the weight forward is typically what I do.
And that's how this one was tested. We should
tell that spin down. Yeah, we did test them with both weights forward. Josh, I think maybe it's time to head to the bay and see what I could do with them.
Yep, let's head over to the bay and see Dan take some swings, and we'll come back afterward and dissect the data.
Josh, we're back here. We've got the showdown image back up. Don't really want to talk about that last swing. I saw a nice little helicopter at the top. But let's go.
I thought that was pretty impressive to hold the pose there like that.
Yeah, let's go into the 10 shots in the chart, taking a look overall at what we're seeing between the two heads here.
Well, the first thing I want to make mention of that hasn't really been talked about is there's a sound difference here that was pretty apparent. Now, part of that will have to do with the weights being pushed forward versus being pushed back. Part of it has to do with Mizuno has really focused quite a bit on sound this year with the entire styling of the driver. But there was definitely a sound difference between the two. So if people are interested in the Mizuno driver after watching this or looking for this at confirmation, make sure you try both of them if you're unsure of the sound on one of them.
Yeah, that not just different sound between the two heads, but I noticed throughout the hitting different sounds as you travel around the head, and we can certainly touch on that later. I think maybe the best move right now is to go into a couple of my best shots with the G and start talking about what we saw. So
sounds good.
The first image here, just going to pull it up. We've got pretty solid efficiency, a little bit high in terms of center face contact, but I believe my best carry overall was some pretty low spin for me.
Yeah, the hard 8, 8 and 8, toe side high. The carry is absurd. I'm sure that our viewers are taking a look at that and want to fight you right now. You get a little high, lose a little bit of spin. Launch was great. Everything about this shot was fantastic. And I remember this one specifically because when we were talking about putting the show together, the best and the worst and things like that, when you look at the impact spot, you don't expect it to be one of the best shots you hit. But everything about this shot was exactly what you'd want to see in a high-performance product.
Yeah, it surprised me a lot. Once again, we do have a decent attack angle. We've seen a common trend there, which is the angle of attack, which is good. I seem to be adding a little bit of loft on just about every driver I've been hitting, but this really took on a nice profile, 14 degrees of launch, and pretty decent peak and descent as well. So not much more to say other than let's just go straight to the second best shot and see what makes it a little bit different. Now this time around, I am a little bit closer to center, right on it in terms of vertical, and then a little bit towards the toe. Contact there. My efficiency did improve from 1.41 to 1.43, which is pretty interesting. Maybe give me some thoughts there.
Well, this is an interesting one as we talk about golfers who follow the internet and who are out there playing. The efficiency was a little better as you got closer to center. Your carry distance was actually just short of it. Backspin was similar. What changed to me was the launch angle and the fact that most people think they hit the ball too high. And I think if once they start getting out there and really measuring some numbers, they'll realize they probably aren't. And if they get out to a PGA Tour event or one of those, they'll see that those guys hit absolutely towering shots with the driver. Yeah. This was one where I think it showed that we saw some decent forgiveness, and we're going to touch more on that as we move forward in the video. But we saw some decent forgiveness here as we make our way around the center spot. And if you look at the center spot as about the size of a golf ball, if we expand that a little bit, we saw some really solid forgiveness here, especially as it pertains to launch, spin, the things that are really going to immediately jump out to somebody who's paying attention.
Yeah, and let's just segue straight into my worst shot with the G, which really actually surprised me because there's, as you can see on the bottom right photo, there's a dot we're not talking about yet. And,
yes,
and that really fascinated me. So we're looking at lower efficiency, obviously a little bit higher on the face. Spin is pretty similar to what we've seen. But the one thing I thought was interesting, we'll talk about this later, was this is a high toe shot, which I would normally expect to kind of come back around to center. And what we're seeing here is a fade.
Yes. And there's two things that jump out with this one for me. First is one of the best shots you hit was slightly high and towards the toe, just a little bit. We moved slightly past that golf ball's center that I was speaking of, right dead here.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of got away from you. And they did definitely stayed right. They didn't fade back. The efficiency went down, and we saw this a couple of times on the toe side. I, the numbers outside of that all look pretty good, but this, 29 yards offline is a pretty big miss.
Yeah, and we saw about 15 to 20 yards of loss in distance overall with the carry as well. I know based on the swings, and I remember specifically with these heads, they all felt phenomenal with the exception of one or two. And this is one of those ones where I really didn't feel like I hit a good shot. And for me, I come to expect some sort of miss. It does surprise me to see the difference in efficiency and carry overall when you can see the other dots are relatively close to that.
Let me ask you a quick question before you jump to a new screen.
Yeah.
When you hit something, your path is fairly consistent. So when you hit something towards the toe by that much, do you expect to see some gear effect bring that back a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it has to do with the way my face is angled towards my target. As you can see, this one's 1.5 degrees closed. And for a long time, Josh, I've been a right to left guy, not because I hit a big draw with an into out path. I hit a relatively limited out to in path with the idea that I'm going to shut the face down and just kind of play a pull draw. So in that case, maybe it's a little bit different for this year. Hard to tell early on, but yeah, I would certainly expect it to be at least a little bit straighter than some of my other misses. But the trend for G definitely was good shots more in line, worse shots hanging out to the right. Did you really go with
batter?
I went with batter. Yeah. So let's just run away from that comment here and move straight into the 190 head itself and talk about some of my best shots there. Starting first with one that was really, really close to what I like to call the button.
Yeah, that one was dead set on, and you saw everything you like to see. Again, the 190, you take away the perimeter track, you have one fixed weight right here. You expect to see a little higher launch. This is exactly what you'd want out of a golf club for you just about any time you're going to hit one. Spin sub 3,000 in your case, you're a higher spin guy. Launch angle somewhere around 14. Efficiency getting right up there. Ball speed 162. I mean, this is everything you want in a golf shot.
Yeah, we're looking head to head, and I noticed the club head speed is a little bit faster than what we had beforehand with the G, but we're looking at, and I'm just looking at this right now and saying, wow, I saw a lot of 23s, 25s. This is 28, and this has hit really well for me. What do you think about it?
I want to point something out about speed that you just mentioned it that we haven't discussed beforehand is we in the first episode of Range Days with the Ping drivers, we talked about shaft length and that they come standard at 45 3/4, which obviously going to make you swing a little faster as you get through that zone. The Mizuno drivers, I believe, and I'm going off memory here, come in straight at 45 inches.
Interesting.
So watching your club head speed stay high was pretty impressive, and I think that has something to do with some weighting that the club feels a little head heavy with swing weight. Obviously, that's not a necessary thing, and we weighed the heads, and it doesn't come in much heavier than other options, but coming in at 45 inches and you getting that kind of club head speed says something.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the spin. Let's go to my second best shot with a 190 and see if it continues there. And sure enough, right at that 2800, Josh, a little bit higher in the face and not quite the efficiency I was hoping to see. Obviously, my path is a little bit more plus 4 out to in. But overall, I mean, still at that 270 carry at 115 with... we just seem to be missing a little bit of efficiency here and ball speed.
Yeah, I think for somebody like you, the advantage of the G head and being able to move these forward, drop some spin a little bit, create some balance. You're not necessarily somebody who's seeking a necessary MOI due to where you hit it on the club face most of the time. You lost a little bit of speed here, but I mean, 271 carry with a high MOI driver. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, and the last two, if you look at the top right image, we're not seeing any curvature to that arrow pointing straight up.
Yes.
Giving some pretty good representation. So let's go ahead and talk about my bad shot. We always have to do that.
The most fascinating shot, I think, of the day here.
I don't know why you do this to me all the time, but we're going to talk about my bad shot. We're over 3,000 RPMs a spin. We have a phenomenal efficiency towards the heel, and
Yes.
and still maintaining relatively close to the carry we saw right on the middle of this face. How is that possible, Josh?
Well, for those who have paid attention, as you go lower, you're going to get a little bit of spin increase, and by a little bit I mean a lot. You'll get a speed increase, but you usually have a very big launch decrease. So efficiency wise, you can kind of see that standing put. But when you're missing 23 towards the heel, and we've all done that, that's over here by these marks. If you're wondering what these marks are, that's how the GC Quad picks up face data. We use the GC Quad specifically, especially testing indoors. It is the most accurate launch monitor out there. We are not sponsored by them. I just wanted to put that out to you. When you're missing that far, you don't expect the launch to stay as high as it did. And this was impressive. And the reason I wanted to put this up as your worst shot is I think most people would kill to have this shot, not just because of the sheer distance, but everything about this screamed forgiveness.
Yeah, I saw this and I couldn't believe the numbers overall. I mean, we're barely offline, and I'm looking at everything about this with the exception of a little bit slower of a swing speed, which clearly means I was missing something with what I was trying to do. And we're still promoting this kind of quality is really telling for the 190, maybe even versus the G overall. And I think that's a great segue right now, Josh. I want to take this down.
Well, before you do that real fast, I want to point something out. One of the things where MOI, which is a twisting property, is so helpful is when you miss that far out, the head has a tendency to twist. Well, in this case, obviously the higher MOI head didn't do that at all, and it was very impressive to see. That weight all the way in the back really can help some golfers.
Yeah, I think you're right. But I do want to take it downrange, Josh, because we've talked a little bit about these two heads. I think it's really easy at this point as I move towards it. I believe the red dots downrange represent the G driver, and the blue dots represent the 190.
That is correct.
So what we see here is a bit of better dispersion off the 190G for me. But I was surprised to see the misses specifically just be kind of way off to the right, even though a couple of my misses were on the toe. What do you think about that?
I'm struck. We're going to bring up some other screens here coming up. Center heel side, this driver feels and seems to perform phenomenally. When we got to the toe side on a couple of shots, we saw something a little different. Now, I don't know if it was limited testing, if anything else, if it's a lack of gear effect. I can't answer that right now.
Yeah.
But I can say it was very surprising to us because we were hitting everything under the sun. This was kind of hit smack dab in the middle of all the drivers. You were nice and warmed up. There was no issues there.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, this thing performed admirably, extremely well, you could say. But that toe side miss when you got out there a little bit was definitely a little punishing.
Yeah, and as you had mentioned, we have two additional elements visually that we can provide here. Maybe we could kick it straight into that. It's a face-on representation of 3 swings, 3 contact points on the head of my 5 swings. We took 3 and represented a heel, a middle, and a toe miss. And this is the ST190G, Josh.
Okay.
So we have...
You're seeing some extreme differences there.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I thought was really interesting, and this was represented by both heads, the maintaining of efficiency as you move towards the heel was much stronger than as you move towards the toe and higher. Now, there's a long time ago where they built drivers where I would have to live high toe, kill some of that spin, enjoy maintained efficiency. It almost looks like my ideal move with this driver would be to kind of hang towards the heel a little bit.
Now, this shot that you're showing right here that people can see kind of sums up what I tried to describe in a previous episode of low, middle, and high as far as what it does. Because when you miss heel side, almost everybody, when they miss heel side, is going to miss heel low. Because missing heel high would be very difficult to do in some ways and causally. So you're going to get a reduced launch, higher efficiency because more speed, and so on and so forth. But what was really interesting to this in general was you can see by the numbers at the top of the screen that there were some pretty big misses here, not just by Dan standards, but in general. And you saw a really high efficiency across the board speed wise. 7 miles per hour difference isn't that large. And we're talking 13 towards the toe and 12 high. That's a pretty big size miss. And then 33 heel. What this showed us was the forgiveness in general of the head. And I found that pretty impressive.
Yeah, so let's kick it over to the regular 190 head and see just overall what sort of differences we had. A little bit more significant towards the toe and high than we see in the middle of the head and we saw from G, but it's almost square on with some incredible efficiency towards the heel.
Yes, the heel side with the 190 was really impressive for you. The whole driver was impressive, and I should say both these drivers were. Speed-wise, they maintained speed rather well, and that's something that you don't like to talk about it, but not every driver does. We've been fortunate enough to review a number that have, but not every driver does.
I would say we're nitpicking pretty hard here to find something that makes this driver less than ideal for a lot of golfers. And now that we've got the screen up and reviewed, let's just send it to all 10 shots again to kind of have an overview look at the two heads. We obviously see a jump in the spin rates. We see a very small increase in the overall launch angle, Josh, but pretty neutral for things like ball speed. Really impressive.
The ball speed staying the same was very nice to see. Launch angle staying the same, considering you had the weights all the way forward, was nice to see. Part of that can be a little bit misleading, and we never want to mislead anybody about where the misses were on a couple of these. But in general, I really do think when you're looking at these two heads in the store, if this one is going to give you the low spin you're looking for, you're going to get some added forgiveness out of here. This one's going to add a whole lot of fine tuning. So I believe they come in at different price points, so it's something to consider there. And I also definitely want you to hit them both and check out the sound, because they do sound a little different. But overall, I do think these drivers are made for the masses, and that's not something I've been able to say about Mizuno forever, I guess is the best way to say it. They've come out with a pretty solid product lineup here.
Yeah, before we take down this image and just throw back up the showdown to kind of wrap up our thoughts, I can't help, Josh, but keep going back to looking at the G. Now, normally I don't look at this for me, especially when I'm off the rack in the stores. I'm looking for a couple things that really really shine, like ball speed, consistency across the face. This really shocked me when I saw the numbers for the G, seeing that carry in the 280s. That's getting really close for me personally to being more of a custom fit number, and I think it really impressed me. Now I'm going to shut the image down and just allow us to give kind of our overall thoughts in it. And I want to kick this off by saying, out of the 10 shots I hit in the bay, I would say 8 of them, I felt like I crushed them. And when we had some good conversation going, we were interacting, getting an idea of what shots were good, what shots were bad. I thought I was hammering every one of those shots, which is such a positive thing to get back from a head. I know you hit a couple shots with the heads, not a ton. Give me your thoughts there on what you experienced overall in the quality of the shot you were creating when you were swinging Mizuno.
Yeah, I hit a couple of shots in the bay, and I actually took it out to play both drivers recently. To me, outside of the fact that they're the same driver lineup, they're very different, to me at least, in terms of feel and sound. But they perform well. I will say I'm not normally a head-heavy guy. In fact, those who follow the Hackers Paradise forum know I actually play 2 drivers. I play a standard 45-inch driver that swing weights out at D2, and then I play a 43.5-inch driver that actually swing weights in at C9. I like it feeling that way. That's a personal preference. It's higher lofted and it's spinnier, and it lets me do things that around the course I can't do. These feel, and I'm embarrassed to say I haven't put them on the swing weight scale yet. I want to say they come in somewhere around D4. They felt head heavy to me. And to me, that's something that took an adjustment personally. But what's funny is watching you pick it up, you didn't really have that adjustment at all.
No, we were doing. We were giving me the opportunity to hit a couple shots before really starting the review process. Each time we changed drivers, and this is one of the heads that I picked up, and immediately the first shot I hit, I said it's probably not going to get better. That we need to get these numbers on the board, which really impressed me. The one other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the experiences on the head, Josh, was when I hit them high and mostly outside. I didn't notice this much in the bay, but when I hit them a little bit high in the face and a little bit towards the toe, it really activated the sound for me. And I like the idea of getting good quality feedback from a head, determining how well I hit it. I think golfers are going to experience a little bit of an elevated sound there.
Yeah, I would say high in general added a little bit of an elevated sound, a bit more metallic sounding, almost hollow sounding. But to me, it wasn't a bad sound, and I want to put that out right away. But towards the toe and high, you definitely bring a definite different pitch. So be on the lookout when you're in the store testing these out. Check your ball marks. Usually a new driver or one that's in the store, you can kind of see that imprint. Check your ball marks if you hear a sound that's not what you're used to, and make sure it'll kind of give you where you hit it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to hear what the forum, the THP community, has to say about these two heads as a comparative, not to mention what they've experienced in the past with Mizuno. Do you have any other final thoughts you want to share about the head or our experience with it?
Yeah, I have one more thing I want to share real fast before we, tell everybody the usual spiel. And it's really twofold. We always hear that when they go into a store local to them, they struggle to find products. And whether that's Mizuno or Wilson or some of the other smaller brands that aren't necessarily smaller, but maybe not as popular. If you go to a store and they don't have the brand you're looking for, tell them. That's something we can't reiterate enough. All these brands want to be in every store. Obviously, that can't be possible. But obviously, most stores give you a pretty solid option of choices. I think that these are options that I think and I hope most people get a chance to at least test out. So if they don't have them in your store, ask them. Find out if there's a demo day in your area as well. There's lots of demo days around the country, not just for Mizuno, but multi-manufacturer demo days where you can test out all kinds of products.
There's nothing better, in my opinion, Josh, than getting out there on a course and experiencing these heads, not only audibly, but downrange visuals to really get an idea of how well you're hitting it, especially based on what you've seen on a regular basis.
I want to put one more thing out there is Dan and I at the Bay were talking. This came standard with the Fujikura Atmos tour spec on one and non-tour spec on the other. And neither one of us are hugely fond of that shaft, would be, I guess, the best way to say it. It didn't fit for me. I think you obviously hit it pretty darn well. But in this head, it seems to marry pretty well. And so if you see that as the standard shaft and it's not something you normally gravitate towards, don't shy away from it. If it is something you normally gravitate towards, I know it's a popular model, you have nothing to worry about.
It's a great idea. And yeah, it was surprisingly efficient for me overall. I didn't feel like I was missing my timing at all, which is always an appealing thing for me. Josh, I think that's it for Range Days with Mizuno. I think all we can do now is ask that if you enjoyed the video, you should like, comment down below and tell us what you thought. Yeah, and then maybe subscribe. We'll have more content coming here for Range Days. We've also done a number of other Range Days episodes that you can check in the THP video section. We also have a great community who will definitely be talking about this driver as the year goes and this particular episode of Range Days. If you want to check that out as well, it's www.thehackersparadise.com, and we'll look forward to seeing your feedback there. Josh, thanks for your time today.